Let's get to work. I decided to enter myself into another manga competition, but this time there's a bit of a twist. The manga competition that I decided to enter has guidelines that made the creation process so much more difficult for me. The rules of the manga competition reads as follows. You may create any story that you wish to tell, but it can't have any words. Yes, you heard that right. I can't use any words or text bubbles to tell my story. It needs to be completely silent. Not only was this going to hinder my storytelling direction, but also make it so much harder to portray what I'm trying to say. I decided to get to work and begin my concept. So as the sketching process begins in the background, let me tell you a bit about the story I had come up with. The storyline I had in mind was simple, yet also sad and intriguing to see what takes place next. I wanted to tell a story about an office working man that dedicates his time to his job and is basically a drone to his workplace. He doesn't feel like himself and tries to block out thoughts of the past to continue with his work. An anomaly takes place though. Just when he thought things would be a standard workday, he pulls up the news channel on his computer during his break to see that the rain is dangerous and has been causing memory loss to those that stand underneath it. He's obviously baffled by this news, and he swings his mouse to try and turn up the volume to get a better listen to what he just heard. As he does this, he knocks over a picture frame of his late wife. That's all I'm gonna say for now, so let's just get into the creative process a bit more intricately. The first page on screen was of the man sitting at his desk, looking anxious and a bit distressed, as he usually is since his entire life surrounds his job. I honestly really wanted to try different ways of creating my manga this time around, so I went for a more sketchy styled look for some pages and a more detailed line art for others. I really want your guys' opinions on which pages look better, because I can't really decide which I like more. There's something so intriguing about the sketched out panels that makes me love them, whilst there are things about the refined line art panels that just do better. The overall composition of both of them makes it hard to decide which I prefer, so you guys just let me know. Anyways, I began the second panel of the page, which was a close-up shot of the screen, so that we could finally see what he's watching. I had to remember that there wouldn't be any words, so I needed to portray what was going on with the rain by using diagrams and different techniques to properly tell my story without using speech. So what I basically did was I drew a newscaster under an umbrella with a microphone, basically hiding from the rain as she hurries into cover with a little diagram in the bottom right. You can't clearly see what exactly is on the diagram just yet, so I decided that I would redo the same idea but with an even closer look in the next panel, just so that you have more emphasis so that the reader can properly see that you should be staying inside. I think I did a pretty good job capturing what I was trying to say, but I knew that the next page would be a much more complicated diagram because how the hell am I going to explain that the rain makes you lose your memory without saying that directly? Whatever though, I ended up moving on to the next page and did my best by once again drawing the computer screen, adding in two human-shaped figures, both standing opposite to one another, and then I added in an arrow to show that the first human is still the second human, but only after a period of time. I then added in a rain cloud over top the first human, and then proceeded to draw a small diagram of a brain with a directional marker pointing to it with an exclamation point. Oh, jeez, yeah, that was a lot, I know, but it properly depicts what I was trying to say, I think, and if it doesn't, then oh well, I did my best. At the end of the day, I want to do these competitions for fun and to challenge myself with new things. And since it gets submitted online, it really makes me want to try my hardest, and I find myself creating some of my best work. For this competition in particular, one of the judges is one of the people that made your name. So I really want to do my best here. Once I completed that panel, I moved on to the next one, which was a shot of the man reacting to seeing this information. He's clearly shocked and confused because what exactly is happening and why is the rain doing that? I captured his expression quite well, and I feel like it turned out as I wanted. I then added in his scratchy beard and mustache along with his extremely long hair. I also drew in a question mark to give off the idea that he's confused, just in case you can't tell by his expression. The next panel was the scene of him hitting his mouse against a picture frame. It was super simple to capture and didn't take me long to draw out. I knew that effects like speed lines, splash effects, and other stuff would really help me tell the story easier without using any words, so I really tried to implement them and use them as often as I could, if it felt necessary. I then began the next page with a panel of the man as he places the picture frame back to its original spot since he knocked it over. His expression portrays grief as to what he's looking at. I then shaded the background, placed the computer in the frame where it belongs, and continued with the shading process for the rest of the panel. Honestly, the sketchy look I was using made the drawing process more enjoyable and less exhausting. I found myself wasting time over the tinier details and less on the overall drawing itself. Anyways, the next panel was a shot of the picture frame as he held on to it. I wanted to show what exactly was on the frame because he was filled with grief in the last panel, so clearly there was something on the frame that made him feel this way. It's a picture frame of him and his late wife, and he clearly misses her. I began by drawing his wife, and I really wanted to make her feel like a comforting character for the story. So I kind of went for like that quiet librarian style look for her design with like those big round glasses. It's like the same drip that a grandmother would wear, but that's exactly the feeling I wanted, because at the end of the day, that's comforting. I then started drawing in the man, which we can name whatever comes to mind at this very moment, John. Yeah, I started drawing John looking the happiest we've ever seen him yet. He also looks healthier, has a more clean-cut beard, and a less distressed hairstyle. He was clearly more at peace with life when she was around, and I really wanted that to be noticeable in his design from the past, and also noticeable with his design for the present. I then added in their clothing, and made it so that she's holding his chin and like, look how happy they are. I then decided to start the next page with a panel of John leaning on his desk and holding his face as he starts to cry. He clearly really misses his wife, and it takes a major toll on him remembering the past. I began this panel by drawing in the desk from the angle I wanted, and then placed the computer, keyboards, and other details that were in the previous panels around the scene. I then desperately struggled to capture the positioning of John that I wanted, but finally landed on something after multiple attempts of trial and error. I then shaded it in using the same techniques as before, and was pleased with how this panel had turned out. The next one would be a really detailed close-up shot, so I wanted them to contrast one another. I began the next panel with a close-up shot of John's eye as he begins to cry and display lots of emotional grief. The emotional pain that he's feeling is almost too much to bear, so he decides that he needs to take action in order to change his way of life forever. He holds his hand up against his face and stares at the computer screen, contemplating what his next move is going to be. Honestly, drawing in this panel was super fun compared to the sketchier look I had going for the previous ones. I went for the more detailed approach on it and honestly loved how it turned out. I think mixing both ideas together can really create contrast between pages and can turn your work into a more complex and intricate design. After adding in his tears, his hair, and other details, I used a cross-hatching brush to color in the darkness of his hair, and began shading in the sections that needed shadow. I then finished off this panel with a black background so you're focused on his eye rather than what else is around him. The next page was going to start with him entering an elevator and pressing the bottom floor button so that he can make his descent from his workplace. I had decided that I wanted this panel to be the second one for this page, so I later shifted it into that slot and created another panel to replace this one. But obviously I still want to show you guys the creation process, so for now we'll leave it in the first slot. I began by adding in the individual buttons with the floor levels, along with the close and open door buttons near the bottom. I then did my best to shade in the metallic lighting for the elevator, since most elevators are made out of stainless steel. Once I added in the elevator itself, I wanted to draw John's hand pressing the first floor button, so that we know where he's heading. After moving that panel down to the second slot, I began the new first panel of this page. It was going to be an overhead shot of John inside the elevator as he contemplates if this is a good idea or not. I wanted to experiment with different angles and points of view for this story, so I tried an expressive bird's eye view, almost as if we were a camera inside the elevator. I ended up looking at multiple different references for inside of an elevator, and even checked out security camera footage to properly capture the warped shape of the interior, along with how people look inside and are shaped and positioned. After finishing the design of the interior, I took a model asset of a man standing and placed it in the angle I needed just to help me form the shape I needed, and then also give me an idea for the proportions. I then drew John's clothing, his messy bun hairstyle, and shaded in the areas that were needed. I finished off this panel by adding in an expression bubble to show that he's sad and is trying to cope with the loss of his wife. I know it looks kind of cringe since it's like an emoji, but honestly, give me a break. I can't use words, and what other way am I supposed to do that? Anyways, once I completed this page, it was time to draw John as he stands outside in the rain, waiting for the memory of his late wife to pass on. Some may see this action as rude or selfish of John to do, but in his mind, this is the only thing holding him back. He feels like he can never truly move on with his life as long as he remembers his past. I started by drawing in the back of John as he stands outside in the rain. I had to try a few different times to accurately capture his anatomy from behind, and eventually I got it down, so I started refining the line art and shaded in his clothing and hair where it was necessary. I then added in a harsh gradient to show it was foggy and storming outside, and began adding in the large clouds over his head along with the splattering of the rain pour over his body and the ground beneath him. I then added any extra details I felt necessary, and then moved on to the most detailed manga panel I have ever drawn to date. I wasn't going to make this easy for John. He wasn't going to simply forget his past. No. He was going to relive it so that he can remember closely what makes him who he is. The main concept of this story is to try and explain to the reader that the past doesn't define who you are as a person, but it will define how you act in the future. Every action or event that has taken place within your life reflects your current and future self every day. It's important to hold on to memories, whether they're good or bad, because that's what makes us who we are, and I wanted to teach that lesson to John. So how I did that is I began by drawing a side profile shot of John as he sits around in the rain. His thoughts and memories begin to flood all over him, and he begins to think about the past, and every memory that he has had with his wife. You'll see exactly how I managed to do that and capture the idea that I had in mind in a bit, but for now, let's start focusing really hard on rendering every little detail on John. I wanted him to be really well drawn, so I wanted John to be well drawn. John drawn. I wanted him to be really well drawn, and so I did different shading techniques and line variation along with cross-hatching and well thought out line art. His design turned out exactly as I wanted, so I continued with the concept I had in mind for the background of this panel. I was basically going to divide multiple sections in the panel surrounding John into different memories that he has. Basically to show that he's reliving his past, and each line that comes out from his body is a portrayal that each memory is what makes him him. Ooh, that's a lot. I started with the first memory simply being the thought of his wife. He loved and cared so much about her that simply seeing her face was enough of a memory that would normally last forever. The next memory was of John and his wife holding hands together. They were truly in love. The third memory was of John smiling as he remembers his wife showing off her engagement ring to everybody. He remembers how excited she was for them to finally be getting married to one another. And the second to last memory was how she looked on the day of their wedding. Truly an unforgettable sight to see. The last memory, however, was the last time he visited her grave. He was unable to move past the grief that he was feeling and couldn't stand to deal with it any longer. I then shaded in the background with a gradient texture to show that it's almost like a blur to him, then added the rain over top because he was still standing in it waiting for it all to pass. But just as he thought the pain would soon be over, the next page begins with a panel of his wife standing in front of him, watching over his actions and thinking to herself that she doesn't want to be gone from his mind. I drew both of them standing as they stare in each other's direction. The rain begins to pour even harder than before, so I added a harsher blur and gradient effect over top of them. I then added harsher rain splatters and a darker sky along with the fading of his wife in front of him. The next panel was a shot of his wife reaching out to him, asking him to hold on to their memories of each other, because once the memories of her are gone, she is gone forever. I started by drawing in her hand as she held it forward. I wanted the motion to be graceful and not harsh or rapid. She was simply holding it out and wanting John to reach over for her. I then drew in her face, along with the details like her glasses and baggy sweatshirt. I then shaded in the necessary sections and decided to make it appear as I intended that she needed to start fading away. The way that I captured this effect was that I started lowering the opacity for each layer. I then copy and pasted it a few times behind her so that I could appear like she's slowly fading out in front of him. I think I properly captured the idea as I intended, so I moved on to the next page, which was approaching the end of the story. The next page starts with a panel of John as he looks distressed and also happy to see his wife. There are tons of emotions that he's feeling at this point, and I wasn't really sure how to properly capture how someone may look at a time like this. I did my best though, and I think I got the general idea down quite well, so then I moved on to the next panel, which was a shot of the now fading away wife, as she becomes a cloud of smoke and disappears right in front of our eyes. Her memory slowly starts to fade away. He begins to forget what she looks like, what clothes she would wear, how she would smile at him. Every single good memory he had of her began to fade. The last two panels of this page were different silhouette panels of John reaching out and trying to grab onto whatever was left of his wife. He was losing himself by the second and wanted whatever he could have while he still had the chance. I tried drawing a shadow reaching out their arm in front of them, and I think I captured that quite well. So I moved on to the last panel of this page, which was a shot of John as he hits the floor after failing to touch the memories that were in front of him, and he knocks out onto the hard concrete floor. Honestly, reading this back, dude, this is so depressing, and I'm really starting to feel bad for the characters, but I must move forward. The second to last page starts with a panel of John asleep with a respirator on. I wanted to capture a close-up panel of him as he sleeps in the hospital, and it seemed like someone had found John after he hit his head and knocked out during the storm. I tried capturing the details of his face, along with the harsh lines and messy hair that was falling over the side of his face. His hair had grown even longer than it was before, so we can assume that some time has passed. I shaded in the needed shadows and fixed up the line art. I then added in the extra details like the cross-hatching and pillow lines behind his head. The next panel was a shot of John as he lays down in his hospital bed as the sun starts to rise. He had finally woken up. I began drawing in the last page of this story, and I want you guys to let me know if you would have ended it in any other way than I did. So the way that the ending goes is that John finally wakes up from his coma and is unable to remember anything of his past. He's simply just sitting in bed waiting for whatever life throws at him, leaving him as if he is nothing but an empty husk of his former self. The only thing that was holding him together was the life that he created with his wife, and since he had lost it all, he lost himself in the process. I know it's sad and could have ended in a different way, but the moral of the story is to try and be harsh about the reality that we are given. There's no such thing in our world as rain that can make us forget our memories, but I can guarantee if there was, there would be people like John that would try and use it to their advantage without realizing how detrimental it could be to try and change the past. Anyways, I'll let this last panel finish up behind me while I wrap things up and submit this manga into the contest. And done. I'll leave the link to my contest submission down below in the description, along with the webtoon link to the full thing in case you want to read it in high quality. I'll also leave my Patreon and Twitter down below where I post early information about new videos, and do my best to connect with you guys and the rest of the art community. Thanks so much for watching, and if you're interested in watching other videos, they'll be shown right here. Have a great rest of your day.